Well, good evening to all of you and good morning from San Francisco. Welcome to our first case webinar on Zoom video communications. I hope everybody can see my video and hear me. If you can just give me a yes on the chat. And I'd also request if anybody is willing to please put your own video cameras on so I can see some friendly faces. So I have to start with a confession this evening. I actually logged into Zoom 1 hour earlier and I was a bit disappointed to see that nobody had logged in. And then I realized that, you've already had your spring shift to daylight savings time. I confirmed that on the web that the time in Europe changed October 31st, but in the US we are going to change to springtime only on November 7th, next Sunday. And so there I was waiting in Zoom and I was having all these anxieties that how come nobody is logging in today? And that's really disappointing, but I'm glad I figured it out and I came back at 1 hour later, which is now 1800 in Finland, but it's 9 a.m. in San Francisco. And I suspect, since you all are global international business students, you will appreciate that I think today there'll be a lot more such mistakes in Zoom calls from the US to the to the European Union. Anyway, that's a little anecdote to start off with. Um, so the way we are going to have this webinar on the Zoom video case is the three teams, Group 1, Group 2 and Group 3 have submitted video presentations of their cases. So I'd like to start off with those. I had sent out an email and I was wondering if did any of you get a chance to review those videos yet? Or would you like me to play those videos right now in real time? So I can do, I think it might be best to play it again because I'm not sure if everybody has already reviewed the videos. So give me some help here. Would you like to see the videos again?
Yeah, I think that could be a beneficial thing.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first I'll send the link to everybody on the chat. This is for group 1 and I'm also going to play it here in real time. If it works for you without a lag, then you can just follow it when I share my screen, but if there's a lag, then it may be best for you to watch it on your own using the link in the chat. So here I am going to share my screen right now. So this is group 1. It's got Maria, Pierre, Jasmine, Otto and Rusa. And let's take a listen to this. So I understand that you're not able to hear the video. So let me change the sound output and then try it again. And thank you for letting me know that you can't hear it. Please let me know again whether you can hear this or not. Yeah, please bear with me. I have to get this working properly. Let's try this again. Please give me a moment to do the settings on the sound because it's really important to get this right. Okay, we try one more time.
So we are group 3 of the course Marketing of High Technology Innovations, and we are doing a case study on Zoom. And our group members' names are Yasmin Sharifi, Maria Silvennoinen, Otto Pietikäinen, Pierre de Vivi, and Rosa Vapama. So the case study issue, how to respond to the fierce competition midst of the pandemic while staying relevant in the market and while receiving pressure from the outside. So in the beginning of 2020, COVID-19 spread into more than 200 countries, and it was declared as a global pandemic. And while COVID, many companies and schools started to operate online, and that is the reason why the rapid growth and the sudden increase of customers for Zoom. So the company has focused on a lot of issues such as security and capacity, but the main issue would be to plan more of a long-term strategic priorities to the company and to decide how and to what extent the company is going to develop its features internally and how much it is able to rely on the marketplace development. So the issue is to find a plan how to keep up the demand and also before and also after the pandemic, and to evaluate what is the impact of the competition on operations and its maintenance. So the current situation, After declaring COVID, many people turned to Zoom for classes, meetings, birthday parties, and also virtual dating. So by June 2020, Zoom was the most downloaded mobile app on Apple Store and Google Play's Play Store. In June, the company's stock value was also more than the triple compared to the beginning of the year. And it is a company of 175 employees who are mostly hired by function managers who are trained to understand about the cultural fit in the working environment. And then the phase for video conferencing. So Zoom offers video, chat, and audio products and services, like, for example, screen sharing to conference room management and developer tools for third parties. Zoom offers also cloud recordings, breakout rooms, and virtual backgrounds. And also it gives the ability to conduct polls and, for example, track participant engagement. So for Zoom, the customer orientation is a priority. So the key component in Zoom's operations is simplicity. For example, user friendliness has improved the customer experience, which is due to patented video-centric technology architecture that the company uses. And by this, the company has been able to offer reliability, functionality, and also quality. The app uses many features to help people to enhance their videos. And it was also the first app using virtual background options as video conferencing tools. Because customer experience is a priority for the company, simplicity and the user friendliness are factors that has helped to respond in challenges concerning also the security issues and implementing new mechanisms for this. Taking the steps to improve the platform on security issues has worked by listening, for example, to criticism and the ability to respond quickly to these security concerns of people and businesses. And that's one of the reasons for the rapid growth.
When pandemic started 2020, the Zoom was leading player of the video conference technology, but the other big players noted the huge market demand, and they started to develop their own platforms for video conference technology, like Google or Facebook. When we are thinking about what are the factors, how the competitors competing between each other, those are pricing, what kind of product features are available and how flexible the platform is, video and sound quality, user experience, like how easy the software is to use, and also security and data protection is well prioritized by users and the customers.
Now about the strengths of the analysis. So the network effect is seen to be beneficial for Zoom, as it would result in increasing their awareness and the number of users. And the network effect is the phenomenon where Zoom would gain additional value as more people were to use it. Moreover, with positive customer reviews, Zoom could aim for increasing growth as it would generate positive word of mouth. Additionally, the network effect is seen to be positive for Zoom, as people have been noticed to stay loyal to one platform rather than changing amongst many. Therefore, Zoom could become the #1 choice of video conference platforms. As Zoom's aim has been set to provide the world's most frictionless video conference platform, Zoom has been noticed to have overshadowed its competitors due to its focus on making video conferencing easier and more intuitive. Therefore, Zoom needs to resemble face-to-face meetings more than the competition to align with its aim. There is, however, still room to improve with Zoom fatigue. So this is the exhaustion from attending many Zoom meetings back-to-back. And this phenomenon is reasoned to be due to the lack of use of nonverbal communication in the two-dimensional video calls. Despite Zoom being a unicorn, so a startup that is valued at more than $1 billion, Zoom should focus on researching customer needs to maintain its technological leadership. This is especially crucial in the changing times with the changing customer needs due to the soon expected post-pandemic era. Research has revealed individuals' interest in going back to the old normal, whereas organizations have shown their interest in integrating a hybrid mode of working. Therefore, due to the changing customer needs, Zoom is expected to focus more on the organizational customers in the future. Moreover, to prepare for the post-pandemic times, Zoom is recommended to make an estimation of the loss of users after the pandemic's wave. This would enable Zoom to prepare for future actions in the uncertain market and to help generate them future strategies. Finally, Zoom is recommended to focus on strengthening their brand equity. And the brand equity is the value that derives from consumer perception of the brand name. This is important to focus on, as brand equity is likely to stay strong even when demand were to fall of the product, as was the case with Nokia and their strong brand equity. And next, on the weaknesses of our analysis.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, about the weaknesses and the risks of the analysis, there are some uncertainties in the market that must be taken into account in Zoom's strategy. We know that the technology itself has evolved over the years, and the company is not sheltered from a new technological breakthrough from the competition. And thus, the company cannot allow itself to be outpaced in the innovational research. However, the situation is more complicated than it used to be. During the past decade, the development of such softwares had enormous potential. The collaborative features with the application portals, for example, were revolutionary back then, and the product line could easily develop. But nowadays, it is quite different. The differentiation through incremental innovations is becoming more and more subtle. We know that all the competitors are battling themselves over features regarding the ease of use or the quality of video, for example. But we are reaching a point where all the competitors are offering more or less the same features and have the same functions. So deepening these kinds of researches in these areas is still obviously obligatory to stay relevant in the market, but the risk is to insist on a dynamic that cannot be exploited forever. After all, there is a limit of improving the quality of video, and the risk is to escalate in features that are not as productive as they used to be, and maybe create an artificial differentiation. So the challenge would be to stick with smart and relevant incremental innovations for the softwares. Because on the other hand, Zoom do not want to lose customers because of overwhelming innovations. They don't want to go too far too soon, because we have to remember that a lot of people still need to learn how to use these softwares. And in the case, if Zoom does have any radical innovations in mind, it would be a great asset, but they have to be careful with them and know when to introduce them. Introduce them when the timing is right and when the market is ready to accept them. So basically, Zoom's current customer base should not be taken for granted, because in these kind of markets, a simple malfunctions of the platform can easily push the clientele towards other competitors. We know that the company already had to struggle with it after some security issues, and the balance has to be found there, both on the short and long term with the customer's experience. So overall, Zoom is walking on dangerous grounds when it comes to the next innovation process, and we have some recommendations for them to keep growing despite all these risks.
So our first recommendation would be to have the focus on the organizational customers, as Zoom seems to be built more around them. In addition, being popular with individual consumers doesn't necessarily lead to more income, as the company offers a free basic plan with a 40-minute call limit. Organizations are more likely to have the paid person, and they are more likely to continue using the service after the pandemic is over, as the hybrid work model will probably remain popular in the future. As the competitive environment is becoming more intense, focusing on the 4 primary industry verticals that were shown in the case study is crucial for future post-pandemic success. It's also worthy to mention that among these industry verticals, especially among educational customers, it is also very important to focus on the individual experience. Some studies have shown that students are experiencing a lot of negative effects regarding motivation and attention span when studying online and using Zoom. And this is actually linked to recommendation number 2, as Zoom needs to respond to all the customer feedback that the company is getting. One big topic at the moment is Zoom fatigue, which refers to the feeling of exhaustion and tiredness associated with any kind of video meeting. The most common symptoms include lack of motivation and difficulty concentrating. One of the reasons for Zoom fatigue is cognitive load and increased self-evaluation from constantly seeing yourself during video calls. By introducing new technical solutions, Zoom could help people to feel less fatigued. AI could be used to process audio and video in a way that would reduce the cognitive load for participants. For example, filtering out unnecessary noise in the background or adjusting and optimizing the surroundings. The third and final recommendation is to strengthen the company's brand equity as warranty for post-pandemic times. In case Zoom starts to lose customers after the pandemic, with a strong brand name, they would still have time to think about what to do and could more easily add a new product to their line or do something totally different under the brand. So this was our presentation. Thank you. And from the last slide, you can see our references.
Hello, we are Group 2, and today we are going to talk.
Sorry. Okay, so first of all, let's give a round of applause to group number 1 for their video presentation. How was the video transmission after we got the sound working? Was there a lag or was it pretty seamless?
It was good.
It worked fine, very smooth. So, you know, already I can see the change from last year to this year. Last year in the fall, when I taught this course, the bandwidth problems were still an issue and there was a lag. And when I showed the video, people were not happy. So they had to watch the video offline. So I just want to point this out that, you know, Zoom has been making these incremental innovations in response to customer feedback. And that was part of Group 1's presentation. So that's really nice. Okay, now we want to have some discussion. I want to throw it open to everybody, but also if anybody is willing to put their cameras on, it would really be helpful. You know, one of the things about Zoom fatigue, at least for the speaker or the instructor, is that if we are talking into the vacuum, then it really the Zoom fatigue accelerates. So thank you to Carla for putting the camera on, and anybody else is welcome as well. So the first point for discussion, thank you Pankaj and Robert. So, and also Julia and Sully, so nice to see everybody. So the first question I want to put to all of you is, let's be constructive in our critique of video 1 and tell them what was good about the presentation. What were the points that really you liked? And so that's the first thing that we need to discuss. Anybody can either comment in the microphone or you can comment in the chat as well. What were the aspects, and be as specific as you can. What did you like about Group 1's presentation on Zoom? on Zoom video. I'm sure there were many things that were positive. So let's just document those. Thank you, Matthias, for taking the lead on this. In my opinion, the fact that the group was using the terminology introduced in the course made it look very professional. Yes, thank you, Matthias. There were some things that they brought in from the course material, like incremental versus radical innovation, and also the issue about the future innovation process, what's going to come next for Zoom. Those were things that were from the course. Lena says there were some good and new points like the estimation of the loss of users after pandemic. I think that's a very key point, Lena, that you picked up. Absolutely. If you look at what's the problem that keeps Eric Yuan awake at night in June 2020, it is really about how to answer the analyst's question about growth slowing down after the pandemic. And Robert says the presentation was straightforward and had good and thorough analysis. I really liked Groups 1's recommendations, especially the Zoom fatigue part was really relevant. Thank you, Robert. And Sully says, really good, clear presentation. In my opinion, the most visually pleasing of the three. And it's also great length. Yeah, it's about 13 minutes. And I had given about 15 minutes. So you, out of all the three groups, you utilized the most time on this presentation. So good. In addition to what people have already written in the chat, I have to add a few. It was really nice to see the embedded video of the speakers, right? So that is always more engaging. And the only thing is, I wish it was consistent. One speaker didn't have their embedded video, but at least four of the speakers had their embedded video. Another point I might add is it would help to, if you're having your video, identify the name of the person speaking with text, because I don't know all of you. It helps me for sure, and I think it might help your classmates as well to identify who is the speaker in each video, because we may not all be familiar with everybody. So those were really very, very slick video presentation. So that's good. Anybody else would like to add any positive comments? Petri says visually very nice indeed. Any others? Okay, then let's move on to the next discussion question for group 1, which is, again, being constructive, what are the things that you might take issue with in terms of disagreeing with any of their, substantive analysis or recommendations. If you saw things in a different way, again, I have to point out there are no right or wrong answers, but there are more defensible answers and less defensible answers. And the more defensible answers are those that rely on the case facts, they rely on good theory, and they also rely on your experience of what you know about the way Zoom has been operating. So let's go to that part of the discussion. I'm inviting comments on, what could this team have done to improve the effectiveness, not only on the presentation side, but also the substantive analysis and the recommendations. Okay, while you're thinking about it, let me start it off by again sharing. I want to just go to the visual comments, I mean, the bullet points of the slide and then make my comments. So, first, this was the main problem or issue, right? How to respond to the fierce competition midst of the pandemic while staying relevant in the market. So my question to everybody is who do you have to stay relevant to? The second part is about relevance, right? Relevance to whom? What is being referred to in this slide? Any thoughts? So we start out with the main issue in the case as they have defined, but I'm just trying to probe a little more. Even the people in the group, I know there's a couple of people, you can also answer. Julia says relevant in the mind of the customer. Very good. So we are talking about the relevance to customers of the product and the service, right? So now the way this is framed, it appears to me that how to respond to the fierce competition, because it appears in the first part of the sentence, it's a bigger or more important issue than staying relevant in the market. And so I would just try to reverse the order, that always in marketing, our focus, and this is true for Zoom as well, Eric Yuan believes it, that it's more important, the customers are more important than the competitors. Would you agree? And so just in terms of framing the main issue, I would reverse this order. And Lena says maybe there is no need for this much focus on giving background and summary of the case text, considering that you're presenting to the Zoom management team. Also, clearly writing down the main problems with the possible sub questions that you're giving answers would make it easier to follow. Yes, thank you, Lena. I think that point reinforces what I said. If you broke up the main case study issue into two issues, then you could put the relevance as the first issue and the competition as the second issue. Okay, let's see if anybody else has other comments that can help to improve the effectiveness of the presentation. And feel free to use the chat or the microphone. So I think this was the part that Lena was referring to, the current status of Zoom. If you are presenting to the upper management, they probably know about all this. So maybe no need to spend as much time on history or background. Okay, now we come to this slide in terms of the analysis. Pankaj has written in the chat the strengths and weaknesses of the analysis. I got a bit confused which analysis was being referred to. Yeah, so this is a very good point that Pankaj has brought up. The analysis should be of the solutions to the problem. So earlier you pointed out two problems, right? The relevance to customers. So in the strengths and weaknesses, you have to analyze, for that, what are you proposing with regard to becoming more relevant? And what are the pros and cons of that? So this seems to be more of a strengths and weaknesses of the the whole company, and that is perhaps less intended in this particular format. We want more the strengths and weaknesses of the proposed alternatives. So that's a good point. Thank you, Pankaj. Now, in terms of this particular slide, I'd like to point to the third bullet point, which talks about, refers to Zoom as being a unicorn. And I wanted to raise this issue. Do you all agree that Zoom is a unicorn in June 2020? Let's just have a discussion on what's a unicorn. This is a term that is used a lot in the popular press, right? But let's try to put our thoughts together. Is that the right term to use to describe Zoom in June of 2020? Any thoughts? Has Zoom had its IPO? So, Stefan, the valuation is over 1 billion, but there are so many companies, mature companies, which are above $1 billion valuation. Is the valuation the only criteria for defining a unicorn?
In my mind, this is what I know. Like that is to be referred to be a unicorn is to have a valuation over 1 billion and to be a startup in a way. So to be a
Yes.
startup company.
So that is important, being a startup. And what Julia just put in the chat is that the company, no, the company had an IPO in 2019. That is data from the case. Did you all pick up on that? So we are already past the IPO. And so Stefan, by your own admission, this company started in 2011. So it would be, first of all, it's had its IPO, and it's also, been around for about 9 years. So I don't really see it as a startup anymore. And that's why I would hesitate to use the term unicorn, but that's just my opinion. Any other comments anybody would like to give to help them, give them some feedback for improvement? So now let's go to the recommendations. Okay, 3 actionable recommendations. What do folks think about these? Any comments about the recommendations? Are they feasible? Are they supported by all the previous analysis? So I like the first recommendation. I think it's very logical, shifting the focus to organizational customers. Clearly that they have more monetization value than B2C customers. However, going back to the earlier comment that Pankaj made, I think the analysis should have analyzed the pros and cons of the B2B market versus the B2C market. If you can list all of the pros and cons of the alternative, then this actionable recommendation is more persuasive to the upper management. Otherwise, they can ask, where did this come from? Have you analyzed the B2C market as well? So, when you make a recommendation, try to link it back to the previous analysis in a strong way. That way you can be more persuasive. Any other comments about the recommendations? How about the second recommendation? Is it very actionable? If you were to present this to Eric Yuan, would he like to know what are some of the innovative solutions to counter Zoom fatigue? Remember, the more specific the recommendation, the more valuable to the management. So it's a little general to say that respond to customer feedback through innovative solutions, but how to do that is a challenge even for management. And so the more specific, I like that you've highlighted Zoom fatigue, but there may be some specific solutions on how to, what they can do about Zoom fatigue. So again, the more specific the recommendation, the more valuable it could be. Similarly, in brand equity, focus on strengthening brand equity. How do you do that? Given that you've highlighted competition as one of the major issues, since there's so many competitors now emerging, can you have some advertising campaign to boost brand equity, right? So again, making a specific recommendation on some kind of marketing or advertising campaign to boost brand equity. And you could also bring up the corporate social responsibility angle, where they've given away so many free accounts to schools and things like that, to non-profits. Those are things that might help their brand equity. So again, I think some more specific recommendations could help add value to the presentation, since you want this to be adopted by the management. Okay, so those are some of the comments I had, but I'd like to again give some opportunity to all the class members to give them any positive or negative critique about the recommendations. So I don't see any comments. If there are any members of group number 1 here, would you like to give any reactions to what you've heard in terms of the feedback? Okay, let's look at a comment Lena just made in the chat. The group said people don't like changing the video communication platform and are loyal. Was this stated in the case, or where did this information come from? Do you mean just B2B customers? Because my team discussed the opposite of this. Like our university alone uses 3 different video communications platforms, and we have used several ones inside my friends group. Okay, so here's somebody who's questioning whether people are brand loyal to the video platform. And Robert Westberg says maybe the third recommendation regarding brand equity could be a little more concrete on how to increase brand equity. Yes, I do agree with Robert's comment there. And in terms of loyalty, maybe we can all reflect on Lena's comment. Is, what do you think? Do you all prefer to have different video platforms for different use cases or occasions? And the thing is, you might have different platforms, but are you loyal within the use context? So for your friends, you might be using WhatsApp or Facebook video, and for your work For everyday keeping in touch with your coworkers, you might use Microsoft Teams, but for actual meetings, you might use Zoom. So you could still perhaps have some loyalty to the brand, because there are switching costs. There are these setup costs. Like, for example, even I had some difficulty with getting the sound working, right, when I showed you the video. So generally, you don't want a lot of switching behavior. So what do you folks think about, is a video platform, is there loyalty, or are people switching? Because the group one said more or less that they are loyal. And, I think loyalty is one concept, but the other is switching costs. So I might not be emotionally loyal to a software or a service, but it's just hard for me to keep switching around, because I know about it. I know how to do the settings and so on. So it might be just the switching costs that are keeping me using the same service. Any thoughts on loyalty towards video platforms? Okay, then let me get back to group one. We have some representatives, I hope, of group number one. Any thoughts or reactions to the feedback that you've got? Maria or Stefan, would you like to make any comments or reactions to give to what the feedback you've received from everybody? So I hope you will, take this as a good input for continuous improvement, and that all of you, whether you've done video this time or whether you've written a case memo, you will get some learnings for the future. So Carla says, based on the user experience, it is easier to stay loyal to one platform. For example, using Zoom if you're familiar with it. Otherwise, there might be time wasted if switching between Teams and Zoom. Thank you, Carla. Maria says, very useful feedback and will definitely be implemented in the next case study as well as in other assignments in the future. Thank you, Maria, for your comments and reaction, and good job again. Let's give group number one a round of applause. Okay, now I want to go to group number two and share with you their video. So we will take a listen and then come back and have some discussion on it.
Hello, we are Group 2, and today we are going to talk about Zoom Video Communications. Zoom is a software company which was founded in 2011. The company is mainly known for its Zoom video meeting software. The app is meant for consumers, companies, financial institutions, government agencies such as education and healthcare, for example. The platform is widely popular due to its easy-to-use user interface and freemium pricing model as well. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided Zoom a great business opportunity, and it has gained a large popularity due to it. It has seen a great growth. For example, in June 2020, Zoom had over 200 million daily participants in meetings, which is 20 times more than before pandemic. Zoom has also had to adapt to its tremendous growth rate, and thus it has had develop the app further constantly and is doing it in the future as well. However, now the competitive situation is getting harder and more competitors are coming into the market. For example, Microsoft Teams has seen a great success and it has a large market share of video communication business. In addition, the pandemic is easing a little bit and it is likely that the remote working is not going to last forever in a similar manner. And this is why Zoom has to face hard decisions. Should it focus more on B2B companies or B2C companies or both, for example? In addition, it has to decide, should it develop the app's functions itself internally or rely on external third-party apps in Zoom Marketplace?
When evaluating the case of Zoom, we chose to analyze it from the perspective of strengths and weaknesses. For Zoom's strengths, we've identified 3: organizational structure, company culture, and the product itself. Zoom's organizational structure is a flat hierarchy, meaning the company was able to adapt to quick changes that happened during the last 2 years very quickly. The CEO and his top management team were able to reprioritize where they were needed. They were able to delegate to their teams, and top management was able to focus on increasing capacity and helping people use Zoom or whatever was needed during the pandemic. I feel like this was a really big strength in how Zoom grew so quickly during the pandemic. Secondly, the company culture. Zoom is led with happiness, and success is measured through happiness. It's important for the CEO of Zoom that everyone in the company is happy. Everyone from all their customers to their employees. This has a highly positive impact on employee motivation. This has also led Zoom to be a highly sought after workplace due to its company culture. Everyone wants to work at Zoom, so they've been able to hire an awesome team with a great skill set and know-how. So they are really the best people in the field. And during the pandemic, the company realized that they can hire people from anywhere in the world, not just in the small San Jose area, but they're able to hire greatly skilled and talented people from anywhere in the world. So I think that's also a strength for Zoom. And lastly, the product itself is a huge strength. They have managed to become what they always wanted to be, an easy, smooth, and efficient to use video platform, frictionless. That's exactly what they are. The product is customizable. It's easy to sync up with other platforms like Google, Slack, and Microsoft Office. Also, the inclusive pricing model is great for Zoom. Free version is optional for low-income users and small businesses, which is why I think Zoom is so popular. Also, the fact that at the heart of product development is always customer happiness, user experiences, and customer preferences. Zoom really listens to what its customers need and want when they're thinking of product development. And this is a huge strength for Zoom.
So when it comes to Zoom's weaknesses, we identified 3 main weaknesses or perhaps challenges that Zoom has to face. Firstly, there is some market uncertainty facing Zoom and other video conference platforms. This is quite common on high technology markets, and it mainly arises from varying consumer behavior and customer needs. So the customer needs tend to change unpredictably in high-tech markets, which then makes it more difficult for companies to satisfy those needs. This is definitely something that Zoom has to take into account constantly. And I think that the big question that is on everyone's mind is, what is the future of Zoom?
because obviously Zoom became very successful during the ongoing global pandemic, but is there a need for Zoom once life returns to somewhat normal, or has Zoom reached its peak? So the market uncertainty is definitely a huge challenge and also a weakness of Zoom. Secondly, the market has become quite competitive as other platforms have developed their own solutions for video calls. So, for example, Google and Microsoft Office can already offer all the necessary tools that teams usually need in their work. So how can Zoom stay competitive in the market as it is only an additional tool that can be used on these other platforms? But as I mentioned already, these other platforms can pretty much offer the same solutions as Zoom, so that makes it harder for Zoom to stay relevant. And then finally, there has been some security issues that Zoom had to overcome. To be fair, they have responded to those issues quite quickly and effectively. However, as the whole idea of Zoom is that it is easy and simple to use, the added security features have unfortunately affected the user experience. And then additionally, these security issues have also affected negatively the brand image of Zoom. So now the company has to win the users' trust back as well. So that was the analysis part of our case study, and then we will now continue to our recommendations for Zoom.
And now moving on to the recommendations. The pandemic has proven that working from home can work, and from the case it can be seen that companies are taking steps to give employees the choice to work remotely in roles that are possible to do so. For example, Facebook predicts that half of its employees would work fully remotely within the next decade. Hiring practices in the future will also not be limited to being physically present in the same geographical region, which will be in a bid to try to access the best talent. Moreover, as the new normal slowly starts, the way of doing business is changing. When in the past people travel to conferences and expos, in the future, it's most likely that there will be a combination of online and offline gathering, leaving space for improving video conferencing technologies. One other factor that has an impact on the future of online conferences is that people are acknowledging the negative impact that traveling too much has on the environment. Therefore, platforms like Zoom will still be relevant, but it will just be a matter of how will Zoom be able to compete with the big market players to keep its market share. So therefore, we recommend that Zoom's strategical focus will stay in B2B customers and Zoom to develop its video conferencing product and concentrating on the quality of the video. In the B2B market, Zoom faces stiff competition from market leaders like Google and Microsoft. Therefore, we recommend that Zoom should not only limit itself as a video conferencing app, but rather branch out into new productivity tools like calendar apps and email services. The company needs to broaden the video conferencing service it has today into a complete platform, which is similar to G Suite or maybe Microsoft Office environment.
In addition to previously mentioned recommendations, we also recommend Zoom to work on its security. Security is a thing that most of us appreciate when having meeting online. Zoom has had issues with that in the past, but has already improved it. However, we recommend Zoom to continuing and putting resources on developing and implementing security on their services, aiming to be the most secure online video communication platform in the near future. One of Zoom's strengths is that it has extraordinary happy workers on its playlist. Companies' employees like their working environment, and it has mirrored to their work and customers. During pandemic, Zoom has grown rapidly and naturally, so it's amount of staff. We recommend that Zoom continues its good work on providing safe place to work since its outcome has been functioning products. Also, great place to work attracts high-level professionals, so getting excellent and skillful employees is possible. Getting and having experienced employees make it possible for Zoom to continue its product development and create the high-level products and services for its customers. Lastly, on the side of aiming to sustainable growth, we recommend Zoom to put effort on social responsibility work and having it as one of Zoom's ground rule. This is since Zoom's customers have made it possible for Zoom to grow fast, and it is more than fair to give back to the society. Also, it researched that 91% of global people expect that companies do more than just make profit. Earlier, Zoom has provided the platform and technical support. We recommend that Zoom will expand its social responsibility work on, for example, touching and trying to solve problems that social distancing life has caused for the society, and at the same time continue providing technical support for social distancing lifestyle. Thank you for your time.
Okay, let's give group number 2 a round of applause. So now we can offer some, let's start out by offering them some positive comments on what did we like about their presentation. So that's the focus of our discussion right now. You can use the mic or you can use the chat feature. So Lena says there was some good and fresh recommendations. For example, I liked the recommendation on possibly broadening the service to a complete platform. Yes, that was specific. They said that you can add calendar apps or email to position it more against G Suite and Microsoft Office. So that's where it was very specific. Ria says, I think the presentation had good emphasis on the recommendations. Also, when following these recommendations, they were justified with the strengths of Zoom that were presented in the beginning. Okay, thank you, Ria. And Riku says, I think the focus on company culture was smart since it's a high priority in acquiring top talent. Yeah, so they explicitly brought in organizational culture. So again, those were all good aspects, positive things. And, one of the things I noted is that this team has gone straight to the problem statement with minimum of background and history, which we had said is good because you are presenting to a higher level of management. So everything seemed to flow pretty nicely, and the commentary was crisp. So those were all the positive aspects. Now let's try to offer them some comments for improvement, both in terms of presentation as well as the substantive aspects of problem definition, analysis, and recommendations. So now we are going to the second part of the feedback. How do you think they could have done a better job, or some things to consider for the future? So let me start the discussion, and while you're thinking about it, so this was the opening slide. It's pretty descriptive. However, I would like to see some more identification of the names and the faces being linked together. Again, I said this for team number 1 as well, but it really does help, if especially in video. In a face-to-face presentation, you see the people right in front of you. That's very engaging. But here you've got to link up with who's who, and also who's speaking at different parts in the presentation. So I didn't know who's starting first and who's going second and third. So a little bit more help with the identities of the presenters would have been good. Okay, let's see if there's any comments. Lena says the analysis was good and thorough, but it was done more on the company and not on the stated problems. Very true. So both team number 1 and team number 2 had this same issue, that it's not a SWOT analysis of the company that's being asked for in this format. It is, what are the proposed solutions to the problems and what are their strengths and weaknesses, or pros and cons. Okay, so for example, here in the problem statement, if you say that the competition is getting harder, then what's the proposed solution? What are you going to do about it? If you want to do an advertising campaign to counter the competition, then what are the strengths and weaknesses of that proposal, right? If you look at the second problem statement, it's about how do you get growth, how do you sustain growth after the pandemic is over? Then you need to suggest some alternatives and analyze their pros and cons. Similarly with what is next for Zoom. So I agree with Lena's first part of the comment. And then that analysis can help you to defend your recommendations stronger. So I would agree with the feedback or the comment that Lena has made. Thank you, Lena. So this is continuing with the analysis, and it's good that they brought in the organizational structure, which is a huge strength, right? And the product experience is good. No questions there. Yeah, so again, this was more like a strengths and weaknesses analysis of the company, but the assignment is that you should analyze the strengths and weaknesses of proposed solutions. So that can be something to keep in mind. Okay, now let's go to the recommendations. Already people did comment positively on some of the recommendations. Let's revisit this. I thought that the first recommendation was on target, very similar to the first team focus on B2B customers. But this recommendation also said that you have to focus on the quality of the video. And absolutely, for the B2B market, which are paying quite good licensing fees, then you have to be able to have a good quality experience in the video meeting. Now, the second one, I think this was already, this is something that Lena brought up earlier, right? Yeah, Lena liked this broadening the video conferencing service. I like that there was some specifics in this, like you're telling us exactly how to broaden it by adding email and calendar apps. However, I would like to question the strategic soundness of going head to head with Google G Suite and Microsoft Office, by trying to position it directly against them. What do others think? I mean, this is a much smaller company. Google and Microsoft have been in business for so long. Is it worth it to just broaden and become like them? You'll be a third player at best, and so I think there is some benefit to having a strategic focus on video conferencing. And I wouldn't stray too far. I think you can certainly embellish and enhance the platform and add features and functionality, but you don't want to, the essence of strategy is focus and discipline. And if you just try to become something else, which there are already clearly established leaders in the market, then it might lead to frustration and low morale. So I would really question that second recommendation. Let's see if anybody has any other reactions to that. Or any other recommendations you see here. So the first two recommendations were specific. The third and the fourth, again, I felt that we could do with some more specifics here. It's not enough to say develop security of Zoom. Tell us what can they do? What actions can they take to improve security? Okay, so should they hire some experts and form a new team in this area? Should they work with another outside company which is an expert in cyber security? Tell me, if I'm Eric Yuan, I would want to know the details. And the fourth one, keep employees happy. This seems to be the status quo. They are already doing this. So what's new about this recommendation? If there is something new, then be specific about it. That would help. So those are some of my reactions to the analysis and recommendations, but let's throw it open. Anybody else in the class has any thoughts about the substantive aspects of Group 2's presentation? Anything you would like to take issue with in terms of the recommendations? What do you think about the broadening recommendation? Lena liked it. I had a different view. How about others? What do you think? Should they go head to head with G Suite and Microsoft Office, or should they try to be more focused on the video conferencing platform? Any thoughts? I hope everybody is paying attention to the discussion, because there's a lot to be learned from being able to provide positive and negative constructive criticism. Even in business, this is something in meetings that you would be expected to do. Yes, Lena, my team discussed it, and I think we ended up on either maybe highlighting a partnership with the bigger companies or giving the app marketplace the opportunity to broaden these services. Yeah, I like the idea of going to the app marketplace, because then you're throwing open the whole idea of innovation. You're not limiting it to the employees of Zoom, and many of the best apps come from the outside. So I like the idea of broadening through that. So you can stay focused on the video conferencing, but ask developers to develop all kinds of other add-ons and bells and whistles to make it a better video conferencing platform. So I like that idea. Any other closing comments to this team about their analysis or recommendations? If not, let me ask if there are any team members from group 2 in the class. Robert, Julia, Henrika, Prabuddha, Elena. Do you have
I'm
any
here.
do you have any reactions to the feedback that you have received?
Yeah, I think the feedback was very useful, especially on the analysis part, that we should focus more on the analyzing the problem rather than the company. That was a really good point, and we will note that.
Okay, very good. Anybody else from the team would like to add anything?
I'm the only one from the team, though.
Okay, again, then thank you, and you did a good job. Now we go to our third video presentation from group number 3. So let me share that and then take a listen.
All right, good evening. We're group number 3, and our case company was a software company called Zoom. Zoom is, as said, it's a software company which was founded in 2011. Their main focus is in conferencing solutions, operating on different cloud platforms. And the biggest leverage for Zoom has been the concurring global pandemic, which was a substantial success for the company. Before the COVID-19 hit, the company was kind of stagnating and definitely wasn't at the level of the competition in the market. But after the pandemic started, Zoom leveraged the situation, and by the end of June 2020, the stock had been tripled and the market capitalization was over 70 billion.
So yeah, and now we're gonna briefly talk about the main competitors, which is, for example, Skype, Teams, Cisco, and some indirect competitors include FaceTime, WhatsApp, Facebook Rooms, and Hangouts. So we stated a few current and future challenges that Zoom faces. And the first one is the pressing challenge, in our opinion, is the variety of privacy concerns. Since the company has profiled themselves as the easiest in terms of user experience, the challenge now is to balance ease of access while maintaining a high standard of privacy across different platforms. And then another issue that we considered vital in this case is the monetization of the service and how to proceed further in terms of adding value to our customers. A key issue here is that businesses prefer to use one service that covers all their needs, such as Microsoft Teams. So the challenge for Zoom is to find an optimal solution for the monetization and the overall platform development. And then also, in addition, highly saturated market with variety of direct and indirect competitors creates the challenge of keeping user satisfaction high and growing business in the sustainable manner.
The COVID-19 pandemic created a huge business opportunity for Zoom, but then again, the situation led to the company having to scale its business extremely fast. When all focus was set for scaling the business to adapt to the current need, the developing of new properties was casted aside. The next question then is, how will Zoom enter into a new phase and focus on creating added value? There is also the huge aspect of what happens to the remote work culture and online-based gatherings after the pandemic. Zoom will face a new challenge on how to maintain existing customers and how to attract new users so that the growth of the business doesn't stop or slow down drastically. Next slide, please. Then for all the problems just listed, there are possible actions to be taken. In order to maintain and stay appealing to certain customer segments, we suggest that Zoom has high priority in developing its privacy features. Although, as has been already seen with trial runs, these developments have to be in line with keeping the software effective and user-friendly. This solution would bring strength for the product as it plays a big role in preserving and acquiring users, but there are also weaknesses related to this because it requires resources for new investments. For example, we suggest creating a secure login process that does not hurt usability or accessibility in open-air conferences.
One of our recommendations we come up was defining a more clear target group and focusing on the already existing best performing target group. What this means is that when Zoom leverages the potential and the already existing customer base, it can improve its core competence and create an overall better experience for the educational and governmental organization.
We also recommend creation additional value through improving the integrability with third-party software such as Office 365, and this could make it easier for companies to adapt to use Zoom. And of course, this would require workforce. We also recommend to create additional value through allowing third-party developers to monetize apps in Zoom Marketplace. The strength of this is that monetization motivates third-party developers to develop good solutions. And if third-party developers are developing the apps, then of course there is no need for hiring new staff to do that task. And of course our weaknesses, if we are using the third-party developers, are of course that there is still need for some workforce for controlling the apps developed by third parties, and of course purely relying on external source of new development can create this kind of situation that Zoom does not innovate internally these third-party extensions. And we thank you very much. And do you have any questions?
Okay, so let's give group number 3 some round of applause for their presentation. And now the discussion is open to giving positive comments to them for what they did right and what did you like about their presentation. So let's start out with that. Lena says the presentation was clear. I liked that you didn't take too much time summarizing the case text and that you had all of the challenges written down and justified. I like that you tackled the problem of monetizing the platform. Thank you, Lena. And Anna says, I like that the team acted like consultants and went straight to the point instead of focusing too much on telling us stuff about Zoom and Zoom's current situation. They also had clear recommendations while also taking account the weaknesses of these. Very good. So let me add some comments as well. I thought that, you know, the arguments made were sharp, and the delivery was very clear. There was a good flow through all of the sections, and so that proceeded very smoothly. Anybody else has any comments that they liked about the presentation? If not, we can go to the second part of the feedback, which is what would you suggest if you had to make some constructive notes about how they could improve and be more effective in the future, both the presentation style as well as the substantive arguments for the analysis and the recommendations. Let's go to that part of the discussion. Again, let me start out while you're thinking about other comments, but I'm here on the title slide, right? And it's descriptive. It describes the course title and the group participants' names, and at least we have on the right panel, we have again the names of the speakers, but clearly it would have been nice to have the pictures of the speakers, right? So that we could identify it a little more. Also, I think for all of the teams, I would like to suggest that your titles could be a little more creative. So, you know, descriptive titles are okay, but the title is a marketing tool to grab the attention of the audience. Okay, so you could have some bold title like, what should Zoom do post-pandemic, with a question mark, or something that tells the audience, you know, whets their appetite. Because, you know, a lot of people say that you have to grab the attention of the audience in the first few, you know, seconds or a couple of minutes at most. So while this title slide is descriptive, I think it can be made a little more engaging. And also, you know, this panel of speakers on the right, apart from having pictures, I saw that it stays the same when you go to the other slides. What would be great is to have the picture of the person who's delivering the commentary, to have their picture and name, so that I know who's speaking. Again, that might require some little more, you know, technical smarts in terms of how to do it, but I think it would be something good to learn for future videos. Okay, I see comments in the chat, so let me go to those. So again, Lena says, even though the recommendations were good and clear, I would have appreciated some more analysis behind them to make them see better argued and justifiable. Fair comment, and maybe we can look at those recommendations individually in a few minutes. And then Riku says, compared to the previous presentations, it wasn't quite as visually pleasing. Well taken point, Riku. Thank you. You know, there was for many of the subsequent slides, there were no visuals at all. It was just text and bullet points. And we all know that visuals help to keep the audience engaged. So that's a good point. Anna says, the presentation felt rather short and the analysis may be a bit superficial. I think you had a lot of great points, and maybe if you would have opened up your ideas a bit more, it would have given the presentation more content. Right. So the whole presentation took only about 7 minutes and you had 15 minutes. So it would have been absolutely fine to elaborate a little more in terms of your analysis and recommendations. And Sully says I would utilize the whole given 15 minutes as this presentation was quite short. So similar in spirit to what Anna said. Thanks to all of you who gave comments in the chat. Please do keep it coming in case there's some more. And now I want to explore some of the details of the analysis and the recommendations. So let me go here. Okay. Here, this had a little bit of history. The point I think that was really good, which was different than any the other teams, was to make note of the last bullet point, which is that the stock tripled and reached market cap of 70 billion in 2020. Anything that can show how dramatic the last year has been, and especially the months of the pandemic from March to June of 2020. There's a lot of data in the case about how much Zoom has done in such a short time. And I think that's worth noting because it speaks to their, resilience, it speaks to their innovativeness, that they are well positioned to tackle the challenges of the future. So I really like that last bullet point. Okay, competition was identified as before. Yeah, here are the main challenges. Now, again, whenever you state multiple challenges, I would submit to you it's better to order them in order of priority from the protagonist's point of view. So, are these the same order that Eric Yuan would see it as in June 2020? And here's my point. I understand that, the point at which Zoom is in June of 2020, it is what we call inside the tornado. That was a concept that we covered in chapter 7 in consumer behavior. After crossing the chasm, when you scale up, the company finds itself in a tornado, right? So that's exactly the position that Zoom is in. And they have been dealing with some of the privacy and security issues, but there is clearly no point in any software company's history where you can say that these problems are solved. So is it really that big of a concern to be in point number 1? Or is growth and monetization after the pandemic a bigger issue? Right? So I would reorder these in terms of the priority. Clearly there are short-term issues and longer-term issues. You might take the view that the short-term issues need to be handled first, but aren't they already trying to address this issue of balancing ease of access with a high standard of privacy? They've taken certain actions to prevent Zoom bombing and provide meeting passwords and things like that. So there's nothing really much you can do about this except that as a constraint. As long as there are hackers and evil people in the world, there will continue to be issues of security and privacy. What really is the challenge is how do you set up a monitoring system to be proactive with regard to kind of keeping ahead of these problems instead of being reactive. So maybe that's the issue. Okay, now, and as I was saying earlier, this control panel of names doesn't help much, but it would help if the person who was speaking could be identified here. Let's go ahead. Right. Definitely scaling is the big issue inside the Tornado. So they have to make their product available. So, try to get it working properly, no bugs, and improve the bandwidth, make it accessible to people through affordable pricing, right? These are the scaling issues. I wasn't very clear about this point. How will the app adapt to different IT ecosystems? My impression is that Zoom is available for download on all the major platforms, whether it's Apple or Windows. And so I wasn't quite sure what the adaptation is. And then life after COVID, this to me is the bigger challenge that Eric Yuan would be concerned about, is that what will the future growth prospects be, and propose some solutions to this, and then analyze the pros and cons. That would be good. Somewhere in the commentary, I recall that the speaker said that businesses need to use one solution for everything. And I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it depends on each business customer. There are some small and medium customers for whom budget is a constraint, and they would like to have, one-stop solution where they pay one fee and have as much features and functionality. But there are also large companies which believe in best of breed. So for video conferencing, they will choose a particular platform. For office productivity, they'll choose another platform. And for email, they'll choose another platform. So I don't know, that particular, assumption might need a little more analysis in terms of examining. Are you sure that all businesses need one solution for everything, or are there customers who would prefer to have the best of breed for different needs? Okay, and then we go to the recommendations. Finding the golden route. If I'm Eric Yuan and I read this, I would say, show me the way. Where is the golden route? Is there one? So this seems at a very high or general level. There aren't any specifics. Tell me what I need to do in order to make the balance between ease of access and privacy. The more specific recommendations, the more valuable. Create a secure login process that does not hurt usability or accessibility in open air conferences. Yeah, so this is specific, and that you can make some suggestions like two-factor authentication or something like that. That will be useful for the top management. Target group. Okay, so you've clearly said that your preference is to target more educational institutions, and again the commentary said that this is the best group to focus on, but I have not seen any prior analysis which discusses the pros and cons of each different institutional market. So when I see this, I'm going to question, how do you know that the educational institution market is the best one? They've got 4 different B2B markets. Where is the analysis to support this recommendation? So that's how you could elaborate on some of these a little more. Yeah, this is certainly good, creating added value through third-party applications. But again, the main issue here is, should you charge for the third-party apps or should you give them away free? In the past, the third-party apps have been free, right? And so this is a major issue, and you have not, discussed the pros and cons of the pricing for third-party apps. So the management would be interested to know how to price the third-party apps. Just to continue as in the past, or should we provide more incentives to our developers to develop more innovative apps? And again, recommendations to match industry giants such as Microsoft. I'm really very hesitant about this kind of a recommendation because Microsoft is such a big 1,000-pound gorilla, and it's got so much of history, so many assets and resources. This would be something that is only even thinkable in the long term, and in the short term, Zoom probably should get its focus right on a more limited platform and try to improve that and increase its user base and growth prospects. So those are some of my comments. Does this raise any thoughts among the class members on any more specific specific comments for this team? I don't see any comments. Keep thinking about it. Now for the group 3 team members, if there's any of you here, Nico, Matthias, Anastasia or Ria, would you like to react to any of the feedback that's been provided?
Hello. So definitely next time we will identify the group members better and add more visuals and elaborate more suggestions.
Very good. Thank you, Matthias, for your reactions. So again, I want to give a shout out to all 3 teams because this was the first teams to go up for the video marketing assignment, and I know it's a lot of work, and overall I'm pleased with what you've done, but there's always room for improvement. And so now we still have a few minutes. Let me go to any of the other teams which wrote case memos, right? You've seen from the videos what the first 3 teams have done, but tell me now, let's bring up for discussion any things that you have done differently, or you might want to bring to everybody's attention that those are some things that you think are really on point. We can go to now throw it open to any of the other teams for telling us a little bit about what they wrote in their memos without actually going over the document. I will, of course, I will read all the memos, and by tomorrow I will put up my own comments and evaluation in Moodle. Okay, but for now, let's have any of the other teams tell us about some unique aspects of their memo that may not have come up so far in the discussion. Any unique problems, any unique analyses, or innovative recommendations? We would certainly like to hear about those. You can use the mic as well as the chat. Nobody from any of the other teams has anything new to add? Anybody would like to ask for any clarifications or raise any other questions about the case which hasn't been discussed? Even if it wasn't something that was written in your memos, if there were issues in the case that caught your attention, but it hasn't come up so far in today's discussion, we might look at that as well. No, it looks like nobody has any issues to bring up. So I'd just like to, summarize or give some closure on this particular case. As you know, the case was written in June 2020. We now have more than 1 year of experience after the case was written. And so just to give you some addendum, clearly Zoom has faced this problem of decreased growth as the pandemic has eased. There's no question about it. In several of the subsequent quarters after June 2020, Zoom has not been able to keep increasing its user base growth the way it was previously. So in some sense, the beginning of the pandemic was a fluke. It was unanticipated. It was just something that was necessitated by the pandemic. All businesses had to get online to practice social distancing while continuing operations, and employees had to adapt to that, and students and teachers had to adapt to that. But now, since in many places, the pandemic restrictions have eased, people are going back to face, both in the offices as well as in schools. Some of that growth has decreased. But to Zoom's credit, they have stayed focused. They have not missed a beat. They've continued to do incremental innovations and improve the experience on the video platform. They've done so much more. There's a product called Zoom for Rooms, which can handle the hybrid format. I've been using it at San Francisco State with my in-person classes, where normally we meet in a physical classroom, but I've told all the students that if you even have a cold, do not come to the class, because we don't know what the nature of the cold or the virus is. So I've given every student the option to Zoom in even during a regular class. And that's the nice part about this new product called Zoom for Rooms. There's a TV terminal which has Zoom inbuilt into it. And it has a fantastic wide angle camera that shows the whole physical classroom to the people who are in Zoom. And it has 16 microphones which are of high quality, so that if anybody speaks in any part of the classroom, it is picked up by the terminal and transmitted on Zoom. And similarly, the people who log in individually into Zoom from their homes, that comes across very clearly to the classroom. So this is something which is fantastic in terms of the hybrid nature. And my own feeling is that even businesses, as the pandemic eases, the one area which will be fertile to continue Zoom meetings is to reduce business travel. Business travel used to be such a big expense for people in sales and field support, right? To send people to the customer site is expensive. And so those aspects can be substituted to some extent in Zoom, and that's going to continue. So I think Zoom has moderated in its growth, but it is still the leading video conference platform, at least in the US. Nobody's come close to them in terms of balancing the ease of use with the privacy and security considerations. So they're still going strong. The stock price is not as much of a rocket ship as it used to be, but Zoom is a very solid company, and it is still continuing its organizational culture and still performing well, though not to the same level as in June 2020. So I'll pause here and see if you have any comments or thoughts about Zoom. Any closing thoughts anybody has about Zoom in general, even if it's not related to the case? Final thoughts in the chat, or if you'd like to use the microphone. So I hope this feedback session was useful in terms of how to improve. There's still 2 more cases that you will have to submit. So thank you for an interesting discussion and feedback session on the Zoom video case, and I hope you will all keep in touch, and I will give you some comments and evaluation and send you an email after I'm done grading the Zoom video case. So thank you everybody, and have a good night. Goodbye.
Yep, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.